Trump's sprawling use of NDAs now threatens to humiliate him. For decades, Donald Trump has treasured non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreements, using them to prevent staff and associates from divulging information about his political and corporate empires. But a recent court judgment has called into question just how ironclad these agreements really are, potentially exposing Trump to many of the secrets he's worked to keep private in all facets of his life. Just last week, the Trump NDA regime suffered its most stinging defeat, with a New York arbitrator ruling against Trump in a case that his campaign had fought for 3 years. The case stemmed from a 2018 lawsuit the campaign brought against former White House advisor and The Apprentice contestant Omarosa Manigault Newman for her tell-all book, Unhinged. In a massive blow to Trump, the arbitrator ruled that the campaign's NDA was too expansive and vague to enforce, ordering the campaign to reimburse Manigault for 3 years of legal fees. The arbitrator, Andrew Brown, said in his decision that the campaign's NDA went too far by forcing Manigault to never say anything remotely critical of Mr. Trump, his family or his family members' businesses for the rest of her life. Brown ruled that to never say anything remotely critical of Mr. Trump, his family or his family members' businesses for the rest of her life. But this ruling is notable for far more than its implications for Manigault. Namely, it could provide a precedent for MAGA defectors and other spurned associates who, intimidated by the vengefully litigious former president, have kept quiet about some of their inside knowledge. This is going to have a massive impact, and it's because of the way Trump treats people when he's done with them, Manigault told the Daily Beast on Sunday, pointing to public humiliations such as getting fired by tweet. "I really do feel that folks who have been mistreated or embarrassed, who certainly have information to share will go, well they haven't heard this story," Manigault said. "I really do feel that folks who have been mistreated or embarrassed, who certainly have information to share will go, well they haven't heard this story." Miles Michael, who worked as an art director on Trump's NBC reality series, The Apprentice, told the Daily Beast on Sunday that he felt empowered to talk publicly and on the record about his former boss, despite the NDA he and many other staffers had signed. "Politics aside, the way he uses NDAs seems exorbitant," Michael said. "Politics aside, the way he uses NDAs seems exorbitant." The Manigault-related decision is the first to follow a court ruling handed down earlier this year by a U.S. District Court judge in New York, regarding the campaign suit against former staffer Jessica Denson. In an emailed statement to the Daily Beast, Denson also called attention to her class action lawsuit against all Trump NDAs. "I took on Trump's illegal campaign NDA as one woman without a lawyer 4 years ago, and through an unrelenting fight first defeated this NDA back in March. My victory made it possible for Ms. Manigault Newman's counsel to file for summary judgment and bring closure to her own years-long battle in arbitration," Denson wrote. "Thanks to my now extraordinary legal team we set a historic precedent against Trump's illegal censorship, and continue to fight for class certification of my win to free all those who remain bound to silence for life." That ruling, which applied strictly to Denson, who is also accused the 2016 campaign of sexual discrimination, did not establish binding legal precedent, though it did give Manigault and others something to build on. Brown nodded to the decision, where the federal judge also found the NDA too sweeping, much broader than what the campaign asserts is necessary to protect its legitimate interests, and, therefore, is not reasonable. Although both decisions were specific to the campaign's NDA, the ripples could hit other parts of Trumpland, because of one fact of convenience that has now become extraordinarily inconvenient for Trump. The campaign's agreement was essentially a boilerplate copy of the NDAs for both the Trump Organization and the White House during his administration. Trump has cloaked himself in the protection of scary-sounding, multi-million-dollar NDAs throughout his career, political campaigns, and one-term presidency. He wielded them with glee during his years as an NBC reality TV star, and treasured their utility as the litigious and flamboyant frontman of his hereditary business empire. Trump has even invoked the NDAs against people who share his DNA when it suits him. Manigault confirmed that Trump's business NDAs were nearly identical to his political agreements, and Trump's former personal attorney Michael Cohen, who had drafted and executed dozens of NDAs on behalf of the Trump Organization, explained the genesis. "For the most part, the campaign's NDA is just a version of the organization's NDA," Cohen said. "For the most part, the campaign's NDA is just a version of the organization's NDA." At the beginning of Trump's 2016 campaign, he continued, there were no NDAs. But then there were a couple of issues where, then campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski was leaking shit to the press and cleverly what he did was he started blaming it on interns, Cohen said. But then there were a couple of issues where, then campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski was leaking shit to the press and cleverly what he did was he started blaming it on interns. Cohen, however, said he never signed his. "I just threw it straight into the shredder, and they're so disorganized that they never knew," he said. When Trump's attorneys later tried to enforce the NDA to prevent Cohen from publishing his memoir, Disloyal, he asked them to provide his lawyers with this supposed NDA I'd signed, and they never did.